The journey to authenticity and living one's most authentic life, it can take time, it can take courage, and sometimes you really have to dig into the most uncomfortable places of who you are to see all of that pain that maybe you're carrying that you have been afraid to tackle or confront. And today we're going to talk to some folks sharing their individual journeys to authenticity, living their most authentic life. I'm going to play a quick intro here and we'll launch into the conversation in just a moment.
I always like to create an environment where people feel comfortable to ask questions. You don't always know what you don't know. You may not have it all figured out today, and that's okay. Taking one step at a time, those glimmers become a consistent light. It all finally begins to click. Each and every moment that you experience is shaping the person you are in this life to be.
Sometimes our pain points go all the way back to childhood.
What if I allowed myself to imagine a life that was more spacious and expansive than the one I'm living?
What if I don't have to live the same way that everyone else is living?
When you are authentic, your energy changes and the people around you change. It's just like doors just start opening. You're like, well, wait, how did this happen? How did this happen? How did this happen? You're showing up completely different.
And often it does require healing and going in some uncomfortable spaces before we can truly flourish.
Thank you so much for joining me for Let's Chat. My name is Shayla Reeves, and today we're going to be talking about embracing the journey to authenticity. We have such an amazing group of folks right here in the Twin Cities that are going to be sharing their stories, their journeys, their experiences that will hopefully inspire and encourage you along your journey and move you forward as well. So without further ado, I'll bring each one of them up. We'll start with Meredith Newman here. Meredith is the founder of Scaling Within, mindset consultant to CEOs, licensed therapist, MS and LMFT as well. Thank you so much for joining me. And we also have Jamila Toussaint. She's the current Miss Black USA 2021. Among your many hats, you're also an attorney, and you love to travel, and you're have so many passions that I look forward to you sharing with us as well today. And then we also have Brian. Excited to meet Brian as well, another newsie, but host of Take What Serves, Leave the Rest podcast, mental health advocate, yoga and meditation teacher, and such an interesting journey. I was actually reading about you today, so I'm so excited to hear about your journey and your experience, and the courage that it took to really follow the person that you knew yourself to be. And then I also want to bring up, last but not least, Shannon Foreman. Shannon is the CEO, founder, and Wealthcare advisor for Forethought Planning. Thank you all so much for joining me today. I appreciate you giving up about an hour of your time today to share in a conversation that will hopefully, push us all forward, and we can take something away from each of your journeys, your stories, and your experiences. Brian, I will start with you. And you as well, also someone started in television, many years in television. but you really kind of had that moment where you're like, wait a minute, I need to take a minute, pause, and acknowledge what I'm genuinely feeling on the inside. Can you tell us a little bit about your journey and your story to start us off?
Yeah, Shayla, thank you so much for having us and for just creating the space for these very, very important conversations. Yes, so I worked about 10 years at one of the local TV stations here in the Twin Cities, and kind of from the outside looking in, kind of had it all quote unquote together, right? Like had the dream job that I got way younger than I ever expected to get, anchoring and in like a top 15 market, and had a lot of really, really incredible experiences working at that TV station that I'm really, really grateful for. And also simultaneously, I think always kind of knew that just for me personally, talking about the news and a lot of the heaviness that can come with that never really felt super authentic for me. And so I think in some ways I always felt like I was trying to kind of fit myself into a role that wasn't authentically who I was. And eventually my body kind of stopped letting me do that. I started struggling with having panic attacks on live television, which, as you can imagine, not a super fun thing to go through. And eventually made the decision to actually step away from my anchor job at the station and really kind of literally and figuratively like catch my breath and just put my mental health at the forefront and really kind of get my feet under me, and have since left the TV station. But what's Shayla, as you know about this career, there's such a beautiful platform that comes with this work to reach a lot of people, and I've been using that platform to talk as much as I can about mental health, my struggles with anxiety, OCD, and really just let other people know that they're not alone. So that's kind of like the Cliff Notes version of what's landed me here today.
And that's an incredible journey, and there's so much fear that comes with, okay, I've been filling this box for all this time, and to step away from what you know and embark on this new journey, which really requires you to embrace and acknowledge all the things that you are carrying, the anxieties, the worries, the all of it, and say, I'm going to face this. That can feel really scary. I know for myself, I spent a lot of life looking for television to show me who I was. And so you move to different newsrooms and you have these aspirations for things that you want to do and accomplish within the field. But it felt like I'm moving to all these different places, but I don't feel like I'm getting closer to that goal. And so once I kind of recentered and did therapy and really unpacked lived life, I got to a place where I can say, okay, I am a creative deep thinker that loves to laugh and help other people see the best of who they are. I just happen to work in a newsroom, and the news is what I do. It's not who I am as a person. And once I was able to finally draw that distinction, a lot of the things that I had wanted to do within news began to happen for me because I acknowledged the person that I was outside of the field that I had chosen. It's a person that you're going to get the same hello in the grocery store that you get at work, and that's okay. Like, you can't look at one space to encapsulate the totality of who you are as a person. So I applaud you for the journey that you're on and the courage it took to be on this journey and this path, especially if it's one that feels the most right for the person that you know yourself to be. That's awesome.
Thank you.
Yeah.
Thank you so much.
Yes, absolutely. And I will go to you, Jamila, next. Tell me a little bit about your path and your journey. You grew up in South Minneapolis, and you've had a chance throughout life to travel. Your father, I believe, worked for airlines, and so you had a chance to travel to see different parts of the world and really expand your view of opportunity and what's out there. What has life how has the journey that you're on, the experiences that you've had, kind of shaped the person that we're seeing sitting here with us today?
Wow. Yeah, I'm glad that you bring up the fact that because of my father, I had the opportunity to travel to all these places. Because growing up in South Minneapolis can be, as a Black woman, it can be lonely, and you can kind of feel yourself being put into a box of who people expect you to be. So because I was able to travel and meet different people, in my mind, I had it, okay, I definitely want to go and leave Minnesota for college, and I want to go to a HBCU. So I decided that I wanted to go to a historically Black college where I could really just own my Blackness and own who I am and learn about my culture and my history. And that really was the foundation of everything, all the success that I've had so far, is being able to be in an environment where I felt super comfortable in my skin. And I think that's like a huge part of who I'm becoming, and being Miss Black USA. It was all because I want other people to also embrace who they are and not go through a long, dreaded path of just unhappiness because they feel like they have to fit into a certain lane or box. So that's kind of where I've started this journey and have been expanding and everything. So
one of the things that I read, and I think it kind of connected with me because I've been in spaces just in life, whether you're in school, like growing up, where you may be the only person of color in the room. So when things come up like prom or the dances and the things that you need a date for, you kind of have this feeling sometimes that like you may not be the one that gets asked, or you may not be the first one on the list for someone else. And those kinds of experiences can kind of have the power in some cases to shape how you view yourself and how you view your worth. Did you kind of feel like that too at points?
Yeah, I mean, stepping on Howard's campus, that was the first time I felt like really attractive, honestly, because I had never been, desired in that way, because it just wasn't a thing where I went to school in Minneapolis. So being at Howard and just feeling like, wow, I'm beautiful, I'm loved, I'm attractive, like all those things play a huge part in a young woman's journey to self-love, so definitely agree with you on that.
Yes. Thank you so much for sharing that piece of your story. I think it probably resonates and connects with a lot of people, because sometimes if you are the only one in the room, the things that you normally get excited about as a kid or growing up for, like, you're like, is somebody really going to ask me? Am I really going to have a date? Like, I can't just think about going to the thing. I got to think about, is somebody going to want to ask me, and all these other pieces to that. Yeah. Thanks for sharing that. Shannon, I'm going to go to you next. Wealthcare advisor at Forethought Planning. I know when we talked, you had shared that the path that you're on now, it kind of took shape after years of operating in a space and feeling like a need wasn't being fulfilled. And you said, I'm going to venture out and create and carve out the space that I feel is needed.
Yeah. Well, like Jamila, I grew up on the south side of Minneapolis as well. And I grew up differently than a lot of my peers in the wealth management space. And let's just be completely honest. I say this a lot, and a lot of people who fit this might get offended, but I work in an industry that is male, pale, and stale. And that doesn't necessarily appeal to the next generation of individuals who are creating wealth and aren't able to speak the conversations and the necessary things that might be different, right? Money is super personal. It's almost as personal as our DNA, and we need somebody to understand us. And sitting in rooms, much like Brian, I suffered a lot of anxiety because I just tried to fit this mold of, a pencil skirt, nylons, perfectly trimmed hair, and, minding my P's and Q's. And I'm just not a minding my P's and Q's kind of gal. And so I had 2 girls and had postpartum anxiety with my second. And it was something that really triggered me into realizing, who am I and what do I want to do with my life? And I knew ultimately that I wanted to make a difference in people's lives, help them make a difference in their own lives and feel empowered around their money and their wealth, and do that for their families and the next generation and their communities. I got tired of hearing, no, Shannon, it'll take too long to make our workforce diverse. No, Shannon, we can't invest in companies that are going to be sustainably good for the rest of the world. Well, now everybody wants to talk about that, and that's something that I think has always been important. So I took the great leap in 2020 and said bye-bye to the corporate world and launched my own financial planning and wealth management practice. Who would have thought at the beginning of 2020 that I would do something like that and everything would have happened that did? But it was a great year to be able to do it.
Creating opportunities where they don't exist to do the things you want to do. I love it. That's awesome. And I imagine since you're on this path, do you feel happier? Do you feel like the way that you show up for the work that you're doing now just feels different?
Oh, yeah. I just spent the last 2 days packing Christmas boxes and holiday boxes for my clients. And I now have a staff. I can do that. I'm not doing it on my own anymore because the business has just grown, but it just fills my heart with such amount of joy to be able to do things like that. And then also to be able to help people in a way that I wasn't before. You had to have a certain amount of money to sit down with me at my previous firm, which is untouchable for some individuals, but that doesn't mean that individuals aren't worthy to be able to sit down and have those types of conversations. How do we continue to create more wealth in the world if we don't have those conversations at any level of financial aspects? So yes, I feel overjoyed. And I don't have to wear a pencil skirt anymore. I wear high tops and jeans and fun, jackets and different things like that. So I don't feel like I'm having to sit in this caged bird box anymore.
I love that. And it's just like you're occupying the space in the way that you want to, creating space for more people to sit down and have conversations with you. And you're doing it your own way. I love it. Meredith, last but not least, tell me about you. You're the founder of Scaling Within, mindset consultant to CEOs, licensed therapist. When you're hearing some of the journeys from our other participants, what's connecting and resonating with you? Do you encounter these kinds of transitions professionally with some of the people that you work with and counsel?
Yeah, very much so. It's been so fun to listen to everyone's stories. I love what Shannon was talking about, creating a path for herself. That's a lot with what I work with. And I also started working with Shannon this past year because I just loved what she was about. So shout out to that. But in answering your question, I'll give you a little bit of backstory. So my background, I'm a licensed marriage and family therapist. My specialty was working with complex trauma and PTSD. And I was in that field for about 10 years. But when I first went to grad school, I also always had this inner feeling that what I would learn would be a precedent for something else. So I went into the field like a natural helper, good listener, but wanted to get the skill and training. But I always had a feeling that it would be a precedent. It would be the foundation for something else that there wasn't a precedent for. So went on with learning and growing in the field. And then in 2016, I had a really strong sense that my time there was done, that it was time to fully let go and bring it into a different place in the world. And so part of my process, and it will connect the dots here, is I was just like going through a journaling process one day, and in it, I had this understanding that I knew applied to me subjectively, but it would apply to a lot of other people. And the understanding was just for my own self, like, Meredith, you have a big heart and a strong intellect. Both of those are good things, but if your intellect is in front running the show, you're at risk to go into striving, performance, anxiety. And if your emotions are in front running the show, you're at risk to go into people pleasing, etc. And it was just this understanding that both our intellect and emotions are important, but they need to be in union behind a deeper knowing. And so in that, I had this just deeper knowing that it was time for me to close the practice. I took a 9-month sabbatical, and then I started Scaling Within. And the whole idea behind that is, whether it's the head of a family, a business, an organization, the issues at the top always flow down, good or bad. So if you can have healthy, wholehearted people at the top of systems, it automatically flows into culture below. And the other aspect of that, and this is in 2016, was really feeling like we were just entering on the cusp of entering this transition of eras, which sounds kind of like big language, but with 2020, it feels pretty clear that we're in a changing landscape. And so it was just this understanding that when you're in a transition of eras, a time in history where in the history books someday you'll look back and say the world was this way and then it changed, when all these areas of society are kind of coming to a head and shaking, and they're not going to end up to be the way that they are in their current form, like the education system, all these different systems are kind of coming to a head. When that's the case, it's the time for pioneering, it's the time for innovating. It's a time unlike any other to tune into what is the unique thing that I have to bring to the world. And so part of my interest or passion was, I know that there's a lot of people out there who are having a sense on the inside that there's something in them to do, but it doesn't quite make sense, because our intellect is great at making sense of what we've already understood, but it gets in the way of what we haven't encountered yet. So if you overly rely on your intellect, it's a limited data set. So part of the work, what I hear with you all, and what I also work with often is people getting to tune into what is that thing in me that doesn't quite make sense yet. Because when you're pioneering, sometimes you're forging a path for something that doesn't exist yet, because it is what's needed in the world.
Thank you so much for sharing that. That is so insightful. And I want to circle back now to Brian and ask you, what do you feel that the journey that you're on right now, and pioneering your journey, what do you feel that this journey has taught you about yourself?
You know, I think it's taught me that I'm a pretty resilient person. I think that's been one of the things. I think we're all way more resilient than we give ourselves credit for. I don't sit here today like with it all figured out. I still feel messy and confused and all over the place every single day, even though I feel like I'm moving in a direction that feels much more authentic and in alignment with like my heart. But it still feels messy, and I still have to kind of draw upon that resilience every single day. And I think that kind of gives me comfort sometimes, just knowing that like I feel like no matter what I go through, whether it's been struggling, with trying to get words out on live TV because my heart is pounding so hard out of my chest and having a panic attack, or, going through relationship challenges and learning that in my personal life, or just like whatever it's been, I feel like up until this point, I've always just kind of put one foot in front of the other and just done my best to keep moving forward. And so I think that's been the biggest thing, is just like I can be messy and confused and still do my best to show up.
And that's okay. Like, it's okay to be messy. It's okay to feel confused. It's okay to not have it all figured out. Yeah. Do you feel like that was something that just throughout life you didn't always give yourself that kind of grace?
Mm-hmm. Yeah, I think I forget who it was that mentioned people pleasing. I think that was Meredith, that you just talked about people pleasing. Mm-hmm. I am a very good people pleaser, and I'm very good at, I think, always kind of feeling like I need to be in like performance mode, or like I need to be on around other people. And so that, while it can be a real gift in some ways, like that's probably what allowed me to do my job as, to the level that I was doing in my broadcast career, was like, I feel like I can, present to the world a very pulled together version of myself, when I know internally the situation is far from pulled together. So it's a beautiful thing, but I think also makes it hard sometimes to just allow some of those emotions to be expressed. And so that's something that I'm constantly working on, right? Is just allowing authentically some of those emotions to come out, and I don't even really remember what the original question was. I'm just talking at this point, but
That's okay. Yeah. But a large part of it really is like the recognition of it in a way that you're like, okay, I recognize that these are the challenges that I face. And like, you know, you're learning how, like, I see it now. So now I know how to work with it or work around it in a way that maybe you didn't always.
Yeah,
feel
just the
that you did.
perfectionism, right? Like being
Yeah.
mindful of perfectionism kind of takes over, and when we get overly preoccupied with just trying to impress everyone around us, and we're completely ignoring what's actually going on internally.
Right. That's so true. And I think so many of us probably kind of find ourselves in that box too. Jamila, I want to ask you as well, the journey that you're on, what has it taught you about yourself?
I've learned that I can't mess this up. You know, I can't get it wrong. No matter how I'm feeling in the moment with the ups and the downs, everything is happening for my benefit. Everything is happening for my good. I've learned how to forgive myself for mistakes and have compassion for myself. And really, I have a practice of saying to myself, if my best friend was going through this situation, what would I say to her? You know, I would be kind. I would be compassionate. You know, I think we're a lot of times we're very self-critical of ourselves. I'll speak for myself. I can be very self-critical. And so I've learned that I can't get this wrong, and that just forgive myself, you know, every time. So.
Yeah, and sometimes you know, when we're so focused on trying to make ourselves fit into certain boxes, like Brian said as well, it's like you have the feelings inside of you that are counter the box you're trying to fit into, but you keep trying to like sort of tamp those voices down, like, okay, I gotta fit here now, just like, you know, put it down. And then, you know, eventually the external pressures sometimes become too much for what you're feeling on the inside, to, you know, be able to alter that or fit in that box anymore. And you're like, oh, how am I going to deal with it? The external pressures and my internal feelings, they are colliding, and how do we occupy that space? And it can feel kind of tough sometimes, for sure. Shannon, can you talk about, since you entered the journey that you're on, what has it taught you about yourself?
Oh, I think I'm still always learning, right? But much like I sympathize very much with Brian. I'm a recovering perfectionist, and it is constant work for me. And that's something that I've really noticed through this process. When I left corporate, I kind of felt in this prove yourself, like prove that you can do this type of mode. And so I wanted to do everything perfect and never mess up on anything. And the reality was that I could be messy, like Brian said, and I could mess up, and I could have days where I was feeling on top of the world, like I could conquer anything and change an industry like I set out to do. And then days where I was sitting in the fetal position questioning, like, am I really supposed to be here? Is this what I'm supposed to be doing? Is this a path that I'm supposed to be on? I'm not smart enough. I'm not big enough. I'm not capable enough to do these things. And that was where I started to allow myself this both and experience. I say it quite frequently for a lot of my clients when I talk about so many different things, but I used it for myself first, saying like, you're allowed to be both and. You're allowed to be big and bold and go into these spaces and feel like maybe you're not supposed to be there, but you're still supposed to be there. And I needed to let go of doing that in a way that everybody else was doing or what I was told to do. In my previous life, you weren't allowed to mess up. I deal with people's money. Like, you're not allowed to mess up with those things, right? And the reality is, so much of what we can do, we can correct and we can fix and we can change. And as long as we're honest and open about the things that might happen, if you forget to send money out on a day that it's supposed to go out, or things like, it's not actually going to cause this fear that I was living in of messing up everything and failing because I messed up one time or I messed up two 2 times or 3 times that I wasn't allowed to fall on my face. And the reality is we're all allowed to fall on our face because that's how we grow. But I had to allow myself that freedom. And so it was like letting go of all of these things. And I just saw how much this perfectionism not only was eating into my professional life, but my personal life, my marriage, my relationship with my 2 little girls, my relationship with my parents, and how I was trying to do all of the things and I couldn't do all of the things. And so I had to give in some capacity somewhere. And I see that so frequently. I walk through life transitions constantly with people. And so I feel like some of the things that I've gone through are abilities for me to help somebody down the road. So if I'm in this moment where I'm doubting myself or I'm feeling incapable of doing something, sometimes I sit back and say, okay, well, how can I use this in a space to empathize with some of my clients or people in my life that are going through those things? And it's just a moment of these feelings. It's not something that's going to last forever. And that's really what helped me deal with most of my anxiety. I mean, my anxiety was so bad that I had cystic acne that was breaking out all over my face. I had digestive issues. And that followed me for, some time in that transition. And I had to really figure out, how do I let go of those things?
That's so important. And letting go of expectations that others may have for you. That's kind of, it's very freeing, but that it's also just scary. Like, because a lot of times we all feel like we need to make ourselves fit in certain spaces, and we will try to shove ourselves in there, and then until our health suffers and we face those kinds of challenges. I know, Jamila, before I go to you, Meredith, Jamila, you had and in reading about you, I know you had made some health changes when you were dealing with the stress and the anxiety. Was it law school, I believe?
Yes.
Yeah. Yeah. And
Yeah.
Can you talk about that a little bit?
Yeah, definitely. I mean, first year law student, not knowing, what to expect. And, they're ranking everyone based on how well you are performing on exams. And it became a lot of stress for me. And the stress was manifesting in the physical with womb issues, with menstrual cycle issues. And so I heard about a 7-day vegan challenge. I also heard about the book Sacred Woman by Queen Afua. She advocates for a plant-based diet. And I said, I could do anything for 7 days. So I gave it a try and immediately saw results from there and never really looked back. But yeah, the internalization of not belonging, imposter syndrome, all of that was causing ailments to manifest in the physical. But meditation, yoga, plant-based diet, all changed my outlook on the way that I was living my life. And getting proper rest was a huge thing, not feeling the pressure. Okay, my study group is staying up till 3 a.m. That means I have to stay up till 3:45. No, rest was really important for me. So, combining all of those healthy changes, healthy habits really improved my my life and helped me get through that stage of my life.
Yes, and sometimes, like Shannon mentioned, the changes with skin, just the impact of stress. It just can affect how we show up in the world. It can affect how we perform in the world, how we see ourselves, because we're trying to push to get all these things done. But at the end, your body says, wait a minute. Yeah. Like, you get to that point where it's like, I can't go any far, and it'll tell you for sure. Meredith, can you talk a little bit about, I know Jamila had said, really every moment in your life is shaping the person that you're in this life to be. So, we do struggle at times to give ourselves grace when we are in these trying, challenging times. We're probably our biggest individual critics. What do you tell some of the folks that you work with when they're on these journeys to living their most authentic life, showing up most authentically, the value and the importance of giving grace in that time?
Yeah, such a great topic. And it's actually one of the themes that comes up most often. I work with a lot of high performing people. And so usually how I talk about this is I first actually talk about healthy parenting as an example. So in healthy parenting, it's a combination of high warmth and nurture and high structure and expectations. If a parent is full of high expectations and structure and no warmth, it's not good for kids. Alternatively, if it's all warmth and nurture, no structure and expectations, it's also not good. We need the both and. So then I often apply that to, and I work with a lot of people in companies, so in leading teams. Obviously in businesses, we have bottom lines, but if people don't feel like they matter or supported, they often don't stay. That's all great, but the whole reason that I bring this up is as it applies to self-leadership, as it applies to our relationship with ourselves. Most people don't even recognize that they have a relationship with themselves. And the majority of the people that I work with, they don't struggle with having high expectations of themselves, but they do struggle with having high warmth. So it's not about lowering expectations. Sometimes that's a part of it, but I actually start with how do we begin to turn the knob up a little on having that high warmth, that compassion. And the other piece of this is once you become a fully grown adult with your full prefrontal cortex online, the highest part of your brain, like you actually become the primary caregiver of yourself. Not only physically to take care of your needs, but also emotionally. So it's really working on a lot of what Jamila talked about, that growing in that self-compassion, because you can get really far cracking the whip on yourself, but you will hit a hard stop. If you really want to get to the next level, it's actually about growing in that self-compassion and that warmth towards yourself. And it's not just a fuzzy sentiment. It's actually neurologically the quickest way to move forward.
Such an excellent point. We've got about 20 minutes left. So if you are watching, if anything that you've heard today has resonated with you, certainly share a comment. If you have a question or anything for any of the folks participating today, please leave that as well. We'll be able to get those in the last 20 minutes or so. And hopefully you'll take some nuggets away from what you're hearing today to push you forward as well. Brian, can you talk a little bit about, and I think we've circled through this with a few different folks. I know I've struggled with it too, people pleaser syndrome. Have you kind of tackled that too? And I think, was it Shannon? Did you say that as well earlier? Yeah, I thought so. Can you talk about how that kind of manifested in your life? And then are there things that you're doing now to try to maybe move away from feeling that that's a space and that you need to occupy, that it's okay if everyone's not pleased with what I'm doing? Do you feel like you're making progress in that?
I could probably just use a lot of advice from the panel on that right now. How I tend to look at a lot of things in my life right now is, and this is just kind of what works for me, is not necessarily trying to get the people pleasing to go away. Like I recognize that that's going to be a part of my experience likely as I journey forward in life. And it certainly has been in the past. But I think just honoring and recognizing when it's there and kind of almost creating space for that to be part of my experience and just like noticing when it comes up and hopefully not letting it run the show too much. Like I'm going to recognize that it's probably going to run the show a little bit, but how can I just make subtle changes here and there to move, gradually away from that? I will say that I think a lot of it almost just boils down to like daily routine things, like making sure that I'm, in the morning, breath work has been a really, really powerful tool for me in my life, like starting my day with breath work. I've been trying to start my days with meditation, a little yoga, like truly, I mean, I know it sounds kind of cliche, but for me, it really helps like to start my day in a space of like grounding into myself just a little bit more and then operating from that space. I think helps a little bit with some of that people pleasing stuff that comes up. But I don't think it'll ever be totally gone for me. But it's just something. It's like a daily practice, you know.
Mm-hmm. I feel like for myself in that journey of trying to navigate people pleasing, I kind of had to have this moment where I said, the people that are in my life for the right reasons, I will be able to have really difficult conversations with them and they'll still be there. Like, even if you have to tell them stuff that's really feels really difficult for me to say to them, um, trying to make myself stay planted in those moments when naturally I'm like, oh my God, I want to run. Like, I don't want to face like this conversation or what the fallout of that will be. And the people that are in my life for the right reasons, they will hear what I have to say. They will stay there. We will have the difficult conversation and they'll still be there.
Yeah.
And then the recognition that if I have difficult conversations and people leave, I'm not diminished because they left. Like, I'm still whole, I'm still me, I'm still like everything here. There's nothing wrong with the perspective that I shared. I'm still a whole person, even if they departed because they didn't like what I had to say. And so it's sometimes, a conscious conversation that I've found myself having to have, but I'm like, okay, they didn't like it, but that's okay. I'm not wrong for having shared that opinion or having put that perspective into the universe. It's how I felt. And, learning how to live your most authentic life will sometimes require us to share the most unpleasant thoughts. And our most authentic self may not be pleasing to other people, but to live and occupy space in the way that feels most real to who we individually are, you have to step outside of the space that maybe other people recognize in order to be the person that you know yourself to be. Shannon, can you talk a little bit about, for you, people pleasing, and how has the journey that you're on, maybe have you been able to come head on and face that, or make any sort of changes or adjustments in how you live and move forward in this new space?
Yeah. So for me, I think a lot of it has been about boundaries and learning the word no. Because a part of my people pleasing is I like literally want to be a part of everything. I never want to say no. I want to be the person that always shows up for anybody. And so I've been practicing, especially lately, even in the business too. Like, I've been asked to do a lot of things lately, and I'm like, I'm not doing anything new until February of 2022. And some people are like, really? You're not? And I'm like, no, I'm not. Like, that's I'm at capacity. So that's kind of the words that I've learned is like, I would love to do that with you, but right now I don't have the capacity to do it. And I don't want to like overcommit and then under deliver. It's a conversation I had with a client this morning too. We were talking about that aspect because we talk about life in general, not just finances. And I learned so much from my clients too in those processes of like establishing really good, strong boundaries of saying yes and no. And to Brian's point, a lot of like routine. I'm the mom of 2 small children though. And so it does, like, I sometimes would love to get up every single morning and meditate. And sometimes it feels just really good laying in bed. And I used to be such a person of routine. Like, I had to get up at 5:45 in the morning. I had to work out. I had to do all of these things. And so that was a part of even showing up as like this. Meredith talked about this new wave of, we're kind of in the Aquarian era, if you get really woo-woo-y like I do sometimes. And we're like in this wave where we came from a very organized, aspect of things. This is how things are supposed to be. And in an Aquarian era, we just like go topsy-turvy and everything kind of gets brought up. And that's what I felt like my life was doing. And so some days I just listen to myself and I say, you know what, today, self, we're going to lay in bed and we're going to scroll Instagram because that's what feels good. And other mornings it's going to be waking up at, 6 a.m. and going out to my garage gym and working out for 20, 30 minutes. But for me, it was about saying yes to myself first before I said yes to anybody else. And that has to be not a rigid routine that I had always lived in. It had to be something that I allowed myself to flow more in. But I also have encompassed a lot of other things like eating somewhat plant-based. I'll be honest, I really like eggs and cheese, Jamila. So I eat somewhat plant-based. But what we put in our bodies, right? Like that the whole element of what do we put into our bodies fuels us. That goes for how do we treat our bodies. So I'm big on chiropractic care and acupuncture and being able to like really physically take care of my body. Acupuncture was a game changer for me, allowing myself to really be centered in who I was and grounded so that I could say those no's and feel really confident. And Shayla, like you said, the people that aren't gonna not understand are not my people.
Yeah. And that's okay.
There's somebody else out there for them. I'm not that. I'm not that person.
And so it's really kind of Meredith, if you could talk about this, it's a lot of it's giving ourselves permission to step into the fullness of who we are. And can you kind of talk about why that's so important? And in getting to that timing, it's going to be different for all of us. Like some people may be there when they're in their 20s, or some people may be in their 30s or 40s or 50s. And whatever your time is, it's okay. I mean, it's just like you've got to go with what's going on in your life and not, what's going on in everyone else's.
Yeah, it's so good. And to connect the dots with what both Brian and Shannon were talking about, and then kind of go into the fullness of who we are piece. One of the concepts that I think about almost every day in some form or another is that all of our strengths become a weakness without a healthy boundary to protect them. So whether it's people pleasing, perfectionism, etc., it's not typically something that's wrong with us. It's something that's right with us that doesn't have a healthy boundary on it. So for example, a fire loose in a home is destructive. That doesn't mean that fire is bad. That same fire within the confines of the fireplace produces warmth for a home and a cozy atmosphere. So this is often about what is actually right about me that needs a healthy boundary. So even for me, as I left my private therapy practice, and it was something I was highly skilled at and trained in, I enjoyed, was good at, to fully let that go, do a sabbatical before stepping into the next phase, that was really a personal ceiling that I looked at, where I recognized, wow, I know that it's inside of me to do speaking, to do writing, but the strength of mine as an intuitive feeler in Myers-Briggs language, but to create a safe atmosphere in a therapy room for people to feel known and understood and truly care, those are great strengths. But those same strengths outside of a healthy boundary go into, I don't want to be in front of people or put stuff out there because I don't want to unintentionally offend someone, or I don't want people to have opinions of me that I can't monitor because I can't do one-on-one attuning to them and who they are. And so for me, it was really, really this thing about I use a lot of child development examples, but we all know that to abuse a child is wrong. That's pretty clear. To neglect a child is just as wrong. For someone to abuse the gifts that they've been given is wrong. To abuse your gifts, to exploit, manipulate, that's wrong. But to neglect the gifts that you've been given is just as wrong. And so for me, it was this recognition with whether it was people pleasing or less than, who am I to think I have anything to offer into the world? It was this awareness of what I have to bring is not better than anyone else's, but it's also not less than. I have a seat at the table and no one else is responsible for stewarding that but me. And my gifts aren't for me, they're for other people. Again, they're not better than anyone else's, but they're not less than. So if I withhold them, then I'm withholding the opportunity for someone else. And so for me, it was what I have to bring is not who it's not for, kind of like what Shannon was talking about. It's for who it's for. And then to connect the dots about connecting with the fullness of who you are, that's this other piece where I think of this as this thought experiment. So kind of regardless of someone's beliefs, I think about, if I'm to think about passing and then one day being on the other side of things, and I suddenly have all this awareness of what I was capable of in this life. all the things that I could have been or walked in or experienced, and to look at that and see I only operated in a small pinky of what was possible because what would my family think, or it's never been done before. So for me, there's really this gut check about we have there's so much beauty in the world, so much possibility. For those, if you've gotten to travel, like there's so many different lives that we can live. We don't get to choose our starting point, but we get to choose our ending point. And so that to me is something that is really invigorating of what does it look like for me to walk in the fullness of who I am? That again, it's not above anyone else, but it's not less than. It's me stewarding what I have to bring to the world, and it's me having my seat at the table and then getting to enjoy everyone else's seat at the table around me.
I love that. Thank you so much, Meredith. Jamila, if you could leave everyone with a final thought, what would you want them to know when it comes to the journey to authenticity? If someone's embarking on that journey or they're in the middle of that journey, what would you want them to hear?
That's a great question. And I think in being your authentic self and being the best version of yourself, it's a personal journey, and you don't have to explain it to everyone around you so that they can give you all this doubt and fear that you may already be dealing with. I personally dealt with the nice girl syndrome growing up in Minnesota. And I found myself running around trying to get everyone to like me. And I still couldn't get everyone to like me. I'm like, what the heck? I'm the nicest person. Like, why isn't that everyone? And people actually resent that a little bit when you're not sticking up for yourself, when you're being a people pleaser. It can almost be, I found myself using it in a manipulative way to get people to want to, listen to me or hear what I have to say or like me. You can't get anyone else to like you. You have to like you. And whoever naturally comes into your circle, I think someone said this before, Shayla actually, whoever naturally comes into your circle and stays there when you're being your authentic self, that's the most beautiful thing in the world, because you can't fake it forever.
Yes, such a great point. And one of the things that I've noticed even on my own journey to living what feels like my most authentic life, when you're really throwing yourself into things that you genuinely are passionate about and you genuinely love, you're showing up as the realest, truest version of yourself. And the people that are responding to that, like you're attracting that energy into your life, and the people that really connect with the person that you most authentically are kind of start gravitating your way. As I embraced creating more and crafting more, crafters started showing up, and I was like, oh, I'm finding my tribe. And it's just such a beautiful thing. But it takes so much courage to be able to step into that space. Brian and Shannon, I'll give you guys both the last word. Brian, I'll start with you. Final thought on someone else that's in the middle of their authentic journey, not sure if, should I stay on this? Should I continue? Am I doing the right thing? What advice or encouragement would you offer to that person in that space?
Number one is that we need you. I really do think that we each have something very unique and beautiful to share with the world. And that might not happen overnight, and it might not turn into a career tomorrow, but lean into it and explore it, and know that, there's nobody in the world that can do what you're going to do. Like, there might be people in similar arenas talking about similar things, advocating for similar things, but nobody is going to have the same expression of it as you. And so don't let that imposter syndrome take hold. And I think allow yourself to be messy in it. I have to come back to that every single day. It's okay to not have it all figured out. Some days it might not feel inspiring. Other days, like I think Shannon was saying, you feel like you're changing the world, and everything in between. So just be gentle along the journey.
Be gentle along the journey. And last but not least here, Brian, I didn't mean to drop you there. My fault.
I thought that was like my mic drop moment. I was just out. It's so good.
It was like shutting down the house. No.
I was like, oh, this is how we're going out. Okay.
Yeah, Shannon, you're taking us home.
Really good.
Yes. No pressure. Yes. Last thoughts.
Brian, I loved what you said. I think that that's so true. I would add to it that it's not going to be easy, but everything that's easy isn't necessarily worth it. And that stuff that is hard is worth it. And it sometimes just being able to go through the mud to see the other side, being able to pull back the onions of yourself and allow yourself to cry and be in those moments. For people who are really tough and don't want to show emotion, like allow yourself to feel all of the feelings and know that it's a constant journey. I don't know if we ever really arrive at a space that is fully, living in our authentic selves, because we're always evolving, we're always changing, and the world brings us more opportunities to step into our true selves. So even in this journey, allow yourself to feel all of those things and find yourself a community of people who are wanting to do that. The Twin Cities, if you're here in the Twin Cities, there's so many great people to be a part of and surround yourself by. I've been so blessed by having a community of really awesome people that do allow me to be messy, to cry, to be the person that I want to be, and who are the people that are like, yeah, you can do it. Because we need those people too.
I love that. Thank you so much, Shannon. And thank all of you for sharing an hour of your time with me. One of the goals that I have for myself, I know we're in the middle of a pandemic, but a goal I set was to meet 100 Minnesotans through my Let's Chat series. So I appreciate all of you helping to push me forward in that mission, and just sharing your stories and your experiences. I enjoy helping people. I like connecting with people. I like talking to people, even if it's virtual. I feel that the connections and the conversations that are had in this space are ones that I hope not only move me forward or you forward for participating, but those who have a chance to share and watch and be a part of the conversations that we're having here. So thank you all so much for your time, and thank everyone for watching. Have an awesome evening, and we'll see you next time. Take care.
Thank you.
Bye.
Bye.
Thank you, Shayla.
Thank you.